Delighted to announce the return of the drinks trolley, but only because that heralds the return of producer Susie, who seems to be a whole lot better. Is that right?
Yes. Let's go with it.
Was it just an extra glass of sherry you needed? Is that what the doctor ordered?
Well, if it was that, yes, definitely.
Well, it's good to have you back on the show. What have you offered from your drinks trolley?
Well, going through some kind of low alcoholic things, really, if you're still doing not necessarily dry January, but just fancy something a bit different. A Radler is a very good option, which is essentially, I think, a German shandy. But Left-Handed Giant do a lovely one, which is a Sicilian Lemon Radler, which is their pale ale, and it's only 2.5%, and then brewed with homemade Sicilian lemonade. So very refreshing.
Excellent. That sounds very good. Matt looks as though he's been stuck in the back with a pin.
Anyway. Sounds great.
I bet you'd like it once you tried it.
I'm sure I would. Yeah.
Today's confession comes from Hugh. Dear parochial Puritans and Matt.
Yep.
My confession dates back to November the 28th, 1985 at around 10:30 p.m. when I attended a concert for the heavy rock band UFO.
Oh.
I went with some friends to the gig at the Oxford Apollo, once again now called by the original name of the New Theatre. I'd managed to get a place at the front of the stalls near the stage, and as the band neared the end of their penultimate song, Doctor Doctor, the lead singer, Phil Mogg, held the microphone still on its stand above the huddled mass of double denim-clad rockers. And it was at that moment that I thought it would be a good idea to attempt to reach up and grab the microphone just for a bit of fun.
Wow.
Surprisingly, this proved a remarkably successful move, and I managed to separate the microphone from the stand and did the most sensible thing that came to mind, placing it to my mouth and shouting the immortal word, "Ooh!" This delightful prose blasted out of the PA, and at the time, my friends and I thought this was really, really funny. And we had a good laugh about it. The microphone was soon retrieved by a member of the stage crew and returned to the rightful owner, the band singer, Phil Mogg. The song had now finished, and rather confused, Mr. Mogg then seemed to be miming into what was now a broken microphone. This was soon remedied, and a replacement was soon deployed, and luckily my misdemeanor went unpunished. Ironically, the gig was part of the Misdemeanor Tour, promoting the new album of the same name.
Dear.
If breaking the microphone wasn't bad enough, it probably cost a few £100 in 1985, so it would be thousands in today's money. The concert was also being filmed for the soon-to-be-released VHS concert tape, UFO, The Misdemeanor Tour. Well, decades passed, and I'd forgotten about my microphone shenanigans and never got round to buying or watching the VHS tape of the concert. However, a few years ago, I stumbled across a DVD reissue of the concert online and decided to buy it to reminisce about times gone by and see if I could see myself in the crowd. Well, not only am I visible on some of the crowd shots, but so are my friends and classmates. And last but not least, it seems that the sound engineer or producer of the mix must have been working on a special Friday afternoon level of professionalism, as the DVD also contains my epic oratory of in all its magnificence, not cunningly camouflaged by the DVD end credits nearly 40 years later. Adding insult to injury, the concert has recently been re-released on CD, vinyl LP and all major streaming platforms as UFO Live at the Oxford Apollo 1985. At around 10 minutes and 24 seconds into the song Doctor Doctor, this is a long version.
Yes, yeah.
Wow.
You can still hear my booming, distorted, shouty voice forever preserved and paying homage even to my moshing, mullet-clad devotion to heavy rock and advanced microphone manipulation. I think we should check this out, don't you?
Yes, I do.
Okay, so let's go to UFO Live at the Oxford Apollo, 10 minutes and 24 seconds into Doctor Doctor. Coming up. Big finish. That's it. It's occurred to me there's not a lot of UFO on Grace Hits Radio.
No.
Anyway, Anyway, based on this historical misdeed, I truly beg forgiveness from you all, and especially Phil Mogg, a former youth boxer of some note, so not a man to upset, and the rest of UFO, including the late great keyboard player and rhythm guitarist Paul Raymond. I appreciate the UFO might not be to everyone's taste at GHR. I do recommend some of their less rocky numbers. Blah, 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 blah. Anyway, yours grovelingly, mulletlessly, but still rocking the double and sometimes triple denim. Really? I mean,
Wow.
That's a man of your age, Hugh. Come on. Triple denim. Okay, I'm very impressed. What, the jeans, jacket and a waistcoat or shirt?
Oh, indeed.
Anyway,
Shirt.
Sister Susie, what do you say to Hugh?
Well, Hugh, very funny. However, you're there to watch and enjoy, a gig, and trying to steal a microphone. You're just being silly, really, aren't you? And I just thought it was a bit of fun. And then you broke it as well. So not only did you steal it and shout into it like a big, I'm not forgiving you.
Well, it's an interesting world where the confession is actually recorded and videoed for everyone to witness,
Yeah.
Brother Matthew.
Imagine that. So I'm going to forgive, and I'm going to forgive for a reason I have never given before on confessions, and that is that I know this person because he told me at the last gig we went to, this was about 2 months ago, he said, why don't I send in this confession about me at this UFO gig? And I said, you know what, that's a great story, you should definitely send it in. So Hugh, we're calling you Hugh because that's your name, Hugh. Yes, you're definitely forgiven, Hugh. Well done.
Wow.
You got on.
Were you there as well?
I wasn't at that gig, but he warned me he was going to send something in like this. Well done, Hugh. You got on. Definitely forgiven.
Okay, people's verdict, please. Do you forgive Hugh for his UFO mic grab? Actually, which then led this to be the highlight of the UFO concert. Okay, it's entirely down to you for the people's verdict, please. Send us a text 61054 and start your message with Simon. Just before 6 o'clock, we had a confession from Hugh, a personal friend of Matt's, as it turns out.
It did turn out.
All about a gig in November 1985 at about 10:30 when at a UFO concert at the Oxford Apollo, which was about to conclude, I think it was going to conclude like this. It's at the end of their Doctor Doctor song. Hugh, this is all being videoed and recorded, grabbed the microphone, grunt and shout. That was him. I mean, you could tell it was him.
Yes.
What else are you going to say when you grab the microphone from a rock star? Anyway, he's embarrassed and he's apologising to Phil, the main guy, Phil Mogg, at a UFO, who are now disbanded again for the third time.
Yeah.
A bit like Tyson Fury.
A bit like him,
Should we give up? Yeah, let's give up. Okay.
Again.
People's verdict is in. Here we go.
Forgiven, says Mick. Bonkers confession. Of course he's friends with Matt. The two rockers together. Ron and Cole Charlton says, forgiven. You have to expect chaos at these kind of gigs. Sounds like it was a right laugh, though. But Anthony says, not forgiven. This happened to me when I was performing at a gig. A guy whooped down the mic, blowing the speaker. I had to continue doing the gig with one speaker and the following day at a wedding. Nightmare. And Debbie from Stockwell says, forgiven. One of my friends had a tug of war with Freddie Mercury at a Queen concert for his mic, but didn't succeed and got a glass of water thrown over him by Freddie.
Oh, okay. Well, it's a pretty good story to tell.
I think so.
And Debbie has just told the story. If you have one of those kind of rocking confessions, we'd love to see it, please. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Send it in. Very nice. Time for grabbing something from the drinks trolley. What are you treating us to tonight, Suze?
Oh, how about a delicious German beer, an Erdinger, always very nice. They do a Weiss beer, which I feel will be up Matt Street, 5.3%.
Oh.
But they also do an alcohol-free version as well. So if you're doing dry January or whatnot, that one might be...
Alcohol-free, that's the one for Matt, certainly.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thanks for the recommendation. Today's confession probably comes from another friend of Matt from yesterday.
Here's hoping.
Today's is from Nathan. Do you know anyone called Nathan?
No, I don't. So,
okay.
you know.
Dear Father Simon, Brother Matt, Sisters Holly, Susie and Katie from a while back. This may be an unusual one and I hope this is allowed, but I'm actually looking to gain forgiveness and redemption for my wonderful childhood cat who went by the name of Smokey. So this fateful day was back in the summer of 1995. I was living with my parents in our family home. We had two cats, a female tabby called Pippin and a charcoal short hair called Smokey. I always considered him my cat, possibly because he was the character, friendly but naughty. much like myself.
Okay.
So the day in question was a beautiful sunny day. We were all sat in the garden listening to some relaxing music and sipping Pimm's whilst taking in the rays. It was me, a mere 18 years old, and both my parents drinking Pimm's at 18, heavens above.
Wow.
Yeah, downhill from there, I think. All was well until we heard a bit of high-pitched chattering next door and a smell that started wafting over the fence that literally made my mouth water. I know that smell, I thought. Our next-door neighbours, Jeff and Diane, were having one of their lavish barbecues. Clearly, we didn't get an invite, but there you go. Jeff and Diane love to entertain, and they were, how can I put it, very la-di-da Gunnar Graham. Di was a bit Hyacinth Bucket, and Jeff was a bit like Boise from Only Fools and Horses, but without the Cockney accent. Although my parents were very civil towards them, they were neighbours, just that. They weren't really friends, as they didn't socialise with the likes of us. As we lived in a quite suburban area, we never used to see them, as we all had 8-foot-high fences. Whenever we used to play football in the garden, if the ball ever went over the fence, Jeff and Diane would take ages to throw our ball back, and we certainly got stern looks when we went and knocked on their door. So unbeknownst to them, my brother and I created a bit of a hole in the hedge to sneak through behind our summer house, so we could go and get it. Anyway, back to the day in question. All sounded well next door, and it sounded like Jeff and Diane and all their la-di-da Gunnar Graham friends were having a very good time.
I'm sure they were.
Until all of a sudden there was a huge crash and a massive bang. We could hear the sound of breaking glass, in the words of Nick Lowe, and plate smashing, but he didn't say that. I heard Diane screech at the top of her lungs, "Jeffrey, the steaks, the aged Australian Wagyu tomahawk steaks."
Oh, yes, those.
Being nosy, my dad and I crept up to the fence and had a look through what I called the spy hole, or indeed the spy hole as everyone else would call it. There next to Jeff's posh gas barbecue was a whole plate of raw steaks that had crashed onto the floor and into Jeff's shrubbery. Di was cursing at Jeff for being daft enough to leave them balanced on the side. Not only that, but it appeared that a bottle of something very expensive had smashed onto the patio floor next to it. You could start to hear a bit of an argument with Jeff saying, "It's not my fault if the wind knocked it over," and Diane saying, "I got those aged Australian Wagyu tomahawk steaks from the butcher's, you fool. It cost me a fortune and now they're ruined." My dad and I began to chuckle amongst ourselves as this drama was being unfolded, but we felt Jeff's argument was a little weak, as it certainly wasn't a windy day. It was at that point that we looked up and saw a sight that, till this day, some 30 years later, made our jaws drop and our eyes widen at the same time. There, bursting out from behind the summer house, was a very crazy and confusing sight. What on earth was it? It looked like some kind of small alien. As it got closer, we realised what it was. There, running towards us, was our cat Smokey, with an enormous raw Australian Wagyu tomahawk steak between his jaws. "OMG," said my dad, as we didn't say back then. In astonishment, the steak he had clutched in his mouth had to be at least 20 to 30 ounces. That's big.
That is big.
For younger listeners. We then put two and two together and realised what had happened. Smokey must have smelt the barbecue, gone through the hole behind the summer house, and like a thief in the night, stolen one of Jeff and Di's steaks. Not only that, but in the process knocked over a whole plate of large, expensive Australian Wagyu tomahawk steaks. They were now inedible, and smashed a bottle of bubbly as well. He had done all of this without anyone noticing, and caused Jeff and Diane to put the blame on each other. The perfect crime. They argued noisily for the rest of the day. Well, we obviously kept quiet, because they hadn't invited us anyway, and we actually rewarded Smokey by cooking up the steak for him, chopping it up, and serving him the best meal he ever had, and certainly the most expensive. Jeff and Diane never did find out that Smokey was the real culprit that day, and it was him that ruined their barbecue and not the wind. I don't think they had many barbecues after that, so we spoiled that for them as well. Sadly, Smokey is no longer with us, what with it being 30 years ago and everything. But I do seek forgiveness for him, even though he was just acting on instinct. It's what cats do. We do not seek forgiveness from Jeff and Diane. They should be keeping an eye on things better. And maybe if they would have invited us to their la-di-da barbecue, we would have been able to stop our cat from pouncing on the exposed goods. Smokey's legacy is in your hands. I don't know, do cats have legacies? I suppose they might do. Anyway.
Wow, that was smooth.
It was a very smooth fade, I thought.
Nice.
Anyway, and Jeff and Diane does sound like a hit record for John Cougar Mellencamp. But anyway, Sister Susie, what do you say to Nathan and Smokey the cat?
Well, I feel for Nathan here because I can imagine a hyacinth and a Boise combination of neighbours probably aren't that delightful. And especially if you're not invited to the barbecue and you just have to listen to it. But she shouldn't buy Australian Wagyu steaks just for a little barbecue, should she? She should eat those in a restaurant.
I've never had one. Is it a good thing?
Well, tomahawk steak is tasty. I don't think I've had an Australian Wagyu one. Maybe we should go out and have some steaks and find out.
Maybe Nigel.
Get Nigel to do them.
Could maybe splash out and spend some money for a change.
Why not? But I don't think I'm not a big cat fan. I've never heard of a cat steal a steak, but I'm not going to forgive Smokey, I'm afraid.
Okay, so that's a no. Brother Matthew.
So I'm going to forgive. Really, it's their fault, isn't it? Whatever. Was it
Jeff and Diane?
Jeff and Diane. Margot and Jerry next door from The Good Life.
Yes.
So they left the steaks unattended, didn't they? You don't leave your barbecue unattended. What were you expecting? Of course, the neighbourhood cat's going to come round and rob off with your steak. And it sounds like, frankly, Nathan was doing very well as well with his Pims at 18 and Summer House and all the rest of it going on. So that sounds
What's wrong
good.
with a shandy at 18?
Yeah, why do you need the Summer House? And also, if you're feeding steak to your cat, good luck trying to get it to have any Mr. Cat or whatever it is they feed cats these days. Anyway, for those reasons, and the Isley Brothers, shall I keep going?
No.
The Isley Brothers.
I think we've had enough of that.
Maybe not. So good to forgive.
Okay, people's verdict, please. 61054. First word is Simon. Forgiveness for Nathan and Smokey the cat. Before the news at 6, we had a confession involving posh neighbours, posh steaks and a thieving cat called Smokey. The people's verdict, here it comes.
So Peter and Hannah from the Vale of Glamorgan say, forgiven, cats are naturally hunters and they shouldn't have left the posh nosh hanging around. Love the show. Everyone else is forgiving because of what the cats have done. So Kirsty says, forgiven reminds me of our Siamese cat, notorious for being naughty. He stole a neighbour's kippers. And Nicola Barden in Axminster in full cap says, Smokey the cat is forgiven. Years ago, my mother's cat dragged back a steak and kidney pie, still in the foil dish.
Thanks, Nicola Barden.
Bye.
I want to know about an Australian Wagyu tomahawk steak.
Yes?
Nigel Barden, get them sorted. We just need to know just a little bit about them. Maybe served with a few chips.
Oh, chips. Steak and chips.
Yes, very good. And some red cabbage, maybe.
No.
Okay, but not for now. If you've got a confession, please send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Is that the sound of the drinks trolley I hear rumbling in at the end of Belinda there? I think it is. What have we taken from our drinks trolley today, Sister Susie? What do you say?
Well, I've taken 3 glasses and a bottle of Gavi.
Oh,
a bottle of Gavi?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Can I have all 3 glasses? Thank you very much. That might stop me fading up Belinda Carlisle again.
Oh, why not?
Slightly too early. Today's confession comes from Steve. Thank you very much indeed. This has a 12 certificate.
Excellent.
Oh,
The phrase different times occurs. Also, don't even bother getting any ideas about this one, kids.
Okay.
Oh, dear.
Little lessons to be learned here. Simon and the Confessions team. This reads like an episode of the Beano. Do you remember the Bash Street Kids?
Oh, yes. Yeah.
One of those.
Naughty.
As a kid, owning a slingshot was my ultimate dream.
Already terrible.
Already dangerous. I spent months saving every precious 20p my grandma gave me each week, handed over with a smile so angelic you'd think she was solving world peace. I even scavenged empty bar soda bottles from the family to return for their 20p deposit.
Yeah, I remember that.
The pop man.
Yeah. After months of dedication, I finally had enough money. But of course, I couldn't just walk into a shop and buy a slingshot. That would have been far too respectable. Instead, I went straight to our local Bart Simpson, the cheeky lad who could get his hands on anything slightly dodgy. For £5, I got a glorious blue and yellow slingshot, and for an extra £2, a bag of shiny ball bearings.
What?
It was the best £7 I'd ever spent. Again,
Yeah, very much.
all of this is not something to be condoned.
In the past.
No.
Naturally, my parents had no idea. There was no way they'd allow a weapon into a house with 5 siblings. That first day, I was down at the edge of the village, gleefully shooting ball bearings at a tree. Even now, 26 years later, you can still see the dents. Wow. That evening, I snuck my prized possession into the house and proudly showed it to my 2 younger brothers. Instantly, I became the coolest sibling alive. Hello. And then came the dreaded knock on the door. It was Dad. He walked in, sniffing trouble like a bloodhound. "What are you up to?" he asked, and we froze. "Come on, what have you got? Come on, show me." Now, Dad wasn't just any dad. He was the king of pranks himself, something we only fully realized as we got older. But that evening, I underestimated him. After some intense negotiations, he promised, "Whatever it is, I won't tell your mother." Trusting him, I reluctantly pulled out my prized slingshot. Dad inspected it, smirking like he'd found treasure, and then he said, "You've got any ammo?" "Really, Dad?" Hesitant but trusting, I handed over my precious bag of ball bearings. Without a word, he loaded the slingshot, took aim, and ping, shot straight through the pride of our bedroom, Mum's beloved lampshade.
Oh, no.
A vintage lampshade, an Art Deco lampshade, pride and joy family heirloom lampshade, was worth a fortune, now slightly less so. She was so proud of it, Father Simon. She'd shown it off to every relative, and now, thanks to Dad, it had a perfect 5mm hole. Dad handed the slingshot back to me, utterly unfazed. He said, "Don't let your mum find that, or she'll think you broke her lampshade. Just say there's a sniper about." Well, I was stunned. My dream slingshot, months in the making, was banished to the woods the next day, where it mysteriously disappeared, like in the TV cop shows, robbing me of the years of joy that I'd planned with it. We lived in fear of Mum discovering the hole, doing everything we could to keep her out of our room. We knew that she wouldn't buy the sniper excuse, even if our father had been reading Day of the Jackal. We tidied up religiously. We dropped our school uniforms in the laundry basket on Fridays without being asked, and kept our room unnaturally clean for boys of our age. We didn't just avoid suspicion, we practically earned a medal for good behaviour. To this day, I don't know if Mum ever noticed the hole in her oh-so-precious lampshade. The Art Deco lampshade. The vintage lampshade. So, Simon, I'm not sure who I'm asking forgiveness for. Me for sneaking in the slingshot, or my late dad who betrayed me by doing the dirty and robbing me of my dream toy so early. All I know is I still mourn that slingshot. It could have been glorious. As could the lampshade if it hadn't been shot. Okay, well, there's a lot of stuff going on there, I have to say, and particularly slingshot and ball bearings. Let's not go anywhere near there, but
definitely not.
A long, long time ago, that was the most exciting thing.
They were, weren't they? Yeah.
If you were reading the Beano, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Anyway, Sister Susie's going to come down on this, I think, very hard.
Well, yeah, I appreciate I admire the commitment to saving up your 20p's and saving the bottles to take to the pot man to save up money for something you want. I think that's an excellent lesson to learn. Well done. But I don't think you should have bought a slingshot with it in the first place. And I'm not even going to start with your dad. Your dad should know better and definitely shouldn't have got involved, and also should have come clean to your mum for wrecking her lamp, because she definitely noticed and probably thought it was one of the boys anyway, and therefore I think the dad got off scot-free and shouldn't. So I don't forgive anyone here, and I think you all should know better and don't play with a slingshot with ball bearings.
If your dad ever says to you, "Have you got any ammo?" you know that maybe he's not on a firm moral podium.
No.
Brother Matthew.
Yes, I think it's quite clear. I'm going to be forgiving here, and obviously laying all the blame at the foot of the dad, because it was him, wasn't it, that ruined the Art Deco lampshade. Also, my guess is that Mum knew perfectly well what was going on, because frankly, when the kids are tidying up their rooms themselves and putting all their own clothes in the laundry,
something's happening.
Know something's up. Something's definitely going on. So yes, I'm going to forgive. It wasn't. He actually did nothing wrong. He did nothing wrong. It was entirely his dad.
He got a slingshot and a bag of ball bearings.
And the ball bearings, and the tree was never the same. But it was all his dad's fault.
People's verdict. Do you forgive Steve, please, on the text 61054. First word is Simon. Forgiveness or no? 61054. Just before 6 o'clock, today's confession from Steve. The story of pocket money being wasted on a slingshot and ball bearings. A reckless dad who said, got any ammo? And then a shot-up Art Deco lampshade, which ended with catastrophe. The people's verdict is in. Here we go.
Not forgiven, says John. They ruined a perfectly nice lampshade. I feel sorry for the mum having to put up with the two boys and the lying dad. Elizabeth says, absolutely not forgiven. My brother used to use my stuff as the lampshade for his BB gun. At 41 years of age, he still hasn't got out of the habit. I noticed fresh holes in my mum's garage door last Christmas. Plus, I adore Art Deco lamps.
There you go.
But Laura in Faygate says, completely forgiven. My dad bought my sister and I a shotgun for clay pigeon shooting when we were younger. Nothing living was hurt, and in fairness, none of the clays were either. Terrible shot.
Okay, interesting, going in different directions there with that. Okay, thank you. If you have a confession, we would love to see it, please. And if we use it, you get a smart speaker. Confessions at greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Unfortunately, we have everyone's favourite bar manager with us. Sister Susie's in charge. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
What are you offering us today?
You can say landlady, that's fine.
Well, it just felt a little bit 80s. I think.
Diplomatica rum, very tasty.
Oh.
I would have it with ginger ale, but you could go ginger beer or even Coke, or this one's particularly nice on the rocks as well. So,
well, Matt's a rum expert. What would you have
I've
that
had
with?
some Diplomatico.
What would you have
Because
it
you bought
with?
it me for Christmas.
Oh, yeah, very nice.
Yes.
What would you have it with?
I would have it with Coke or ginger ale or on the
You're
rocks.
not fast,
Yes.
basically, not fast.
I'll just have it all.
however it comes.
Anything that Susie said, that's the
Yeah.
way. Okay, today's confession comes from, can I say your name? Mark. Yes, I can. Okay. Simon and the team, I need to make the following confession. Dear Father Simon, Sister Susie, and brother, the Punmeister Matt.
That's right.
My name is Mark, and I've followed you from radio station to radio station. I'm not a stalker, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
I'm that old, I even remember listening to your dad on the radio during the late 80s. I'm just trying to work out. I mean, maybe my dad came into the studio once, but he didn't have a show. As far as I'm aware.
Quite the revelation.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow.
Anyway, my confession starts off in the 90s, but concludes in the last half of the noughties. It revolves around my eldest daughter, Sophie, and her early love of sheep. As a family of three, the other three children hadn't been born yet, and that's when the story starts, we used to enjoy lots of camping trips to Wales. And this is where Sophie's love of sheep started. She used to point them out all the time and even run after them whenever we were out walking, which was great up until the point where she would attempt to run across country roads to try and get to the sheep.
Oh.
And we needed eyes in the back of our heads, and then we discovered the reins and everything was fine. But obviously this is a problem. Anyway, one trip to Wales resulted in Sophie escaping our clutches. By the time we realised she was gone, we heard screams and crying. And we looked up and there was Sophie trying to get to this fluffy white sheep with cute, long black ears, and unfortunately there was a farmer's fence in between her and the sheep, which she'd managed to get tangled in. We managed to get her out of the predicament, only to find that she'd torn her best coat, and we then had to drive to the nearest shops to purchase a new one. So we can see the conundrum. This behaviour became the norm, and I needed a way to curb her enthusiasm. So I hatched my plan, which involved shedding a somewhat less cute and fluffy appearance on the little sheep. Basically, he's going to lie.
He's going to lie. Okay, good.
One morning we packed up the car and we set off for Wales on our camping holiday, and yes, all the way there Sophie would be pointing out every sheep that she could see. As you can imagine, there's a lot of them. All of a sudden I decided to play out my plan, and I explained to Sophie that not all sheep are nice and cuddly. In fact, the Suffolk sheep that she was looking at, the ones with long black ears, were also known as killer sheep. They were so fearsome that it was actually them that had caused the extinction of the native wolf in England.
Oh, no.
Yes, the long black-eared sheep had eaten all the wolves. I even went on to explain that since all the wolves had gone, they'd now reverted to eating small children. I think this is an unnecessary exaggeration. Yeah. Needless to say, over the coming years, Sophie's love and enthusiasm for sheep dwindled up to the point where we'd completely forgotten about it, until One day, years later, when Sophie was 13 and on her first high school geography trip, I came home from work to a very, very unhappy daughter as she sat me and my wife down to explain that they'd seen some sheep on their field trip. And when they got pointed out by her classmates, she piped up and explained to everyone on the coach that the ones with long black ears were the well-known Suffolk killer sheep.
Oh dear.
Her classmates and teachers were very puzzled by this, and when she explained the story, they all spontaneously burst into laughter. And yes, you guessed it, my wife and myself, along with our other daughters, who had since appeared on the scene, burst into laughter as well. We still joke about this now, even with Sophie turning 30. I wonder if she finds it quite so funny, Mark. Well, Father Simon and Sister Susie, Brother Matt, also Sister Katie and Holly, wherever they are, I don't seek forgiveness from Sophie or her classmates, but for all the long black-eared sheep that have been classified as killer sheep over the years in our household. Well, I can see what you did there. I mean, I do think the little twist about sheep eating small children might have been a step too far, but far be it from me. Let's see what Sister Susie makes of all that.
Well, Mark, this is a tough one because I understand the reasons why you did what you did, because there were dangerous situations that your daughter's infatuation with the sheep was causing, and that could have been disastrous. So I understand why you felt the need to do what you did. However, like calling them killer sheep, I don't know if I agree with. And also saying that they eat small children. I just think you took it a little bit too far. And at some point, when she was a bit older, you could have also told her the truth so that she didn't end up embarrassed in front of her class. At 13, her friends the other classmates aren't going to let her live that down. They're going to bring it up all the time. She could get a terrible nickname. It's not fun. Not forgiven.
Okay, that was quite a soliloquy.
It was, wasn't it? I like that.
Sister Susie, Brother Matthew.
So I'm going to forgive for two reasons. One, it's very creative, and as Susie points out, they were trying to avoid something awful happening by running across country roads. So you've got to get creative, come up with a reason why she can't go near the sheep anymore. And also, it's a really fertile scene for us, isn't it? This idea you lie to your kids, and they believe the lie right up until when they're much older. I love those stories.
And then you're in trouble.
And then you're in trouble. But it doesn't matter because, Sophie might not have found it funny, but I found it funny, and that's what counts. And so for that reason, I'm going to forgive.
61054 is the text, and then the first word of your text has to be, Simon, for the people's verdict. Do you forgive Mark for his sheep confession? Just before the news, we had a confession from Mark about his daughter, Sophie, who liked sheep, but liked sheep too much, to the extent she would cross the road and she got tangled in some barbed wire and ruined her coat. So consequently, he made up a story that the long black-eared sheep that she liked were actually killer sheep, which is absolutely fine until she went on a school field trip many, many years later, and everybody laughed. The people's verdict is in. Here we go.
Easy to forgive this one, says Farmer Bill in Surrey. Ultimately, no one got hurt, and she was much more wary of wild sheep in a field. Sheep need to be left alone and respected, not run over to and petted. But Glenn in Milton Keynes says, not forgiven. My mum told me that thunder was clouds banging together, and I got a house point deducted for being stupid when I gave that as an answer in a physics lesson.
Thanks, Mum.
And finally, sorry, can't forgive this one, as we are constantly struggling to encourage the youth of today to get into farming. He's probably deprived the sheep industry of the next greatest ever shepherdess. And that's from Rach and Maisie milking the cows in Sapcote in Leicestershire because we can't get anyone else to do it.
All right, very good. Thank you very much indeed for the verdicts, and thank you for your confessions. And if you have one, we would love to see it. If we use it, you get a smart speaker. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.